welcome back. We finna get into a nigga named Henry Snowflakes. Never heard of this nigga. Don't know who he is. And this is my first time about to learn about this situation. So we finna see what's up, because apparently he ends up in an electric chair. So we finna see why.
Henry David Flakes came out of Alabama the hard way, born inside a cotton picker's cabin near Opelika, before his family drifted north to Chattanooga, Tennessee, looking for steadier ground and fewer empty cupboards. The Flakes boys grew up in a world where work was hard and boxing lessons happened in the backyard, beneath southern heat, thick enough to suffocate conversation. Their father loved boxing, though he never fought professionally himself. Instead, he turned the yard into a makeshift gymnasium, wrapping burlap sacks stuffed with old rags around his son's fists because proper gloves cost money nobody had. Henry, the eldest, learned quickly. Too quickly. One night he drove a right cross into his father's jaw and knocked the old man unconscious for 10 terrifying minutes. Backyard boxing practice quietly ended after that. Thereafter, all my boxing was done in the Howard High School gym, Flake said. My father still helped me in the corner. At Howard High, he played football, fought in amateur smokers and battle royals, and developed the kind of toughness that seemed common among fighters of that era and almost unthinkable now. Still under 18, Flakes falsified his age and joined the Navy. He served at Pearl Harbor during the Japanese attack, and later carried home a jagged scar across the bridge of his nose after an exploding aircraft aboard the USS Nassau sent metal shrapnel tearing into his face. I was unconscious 10 hours, Flake said.
You motherfuckers better have this in mind. When you motherfuckers is out here letting people burn this American flag, when you motherfuckers is out here talking about the veterans and all that, when you motherfuckers is out here talking shit about the country and how the country is this, that, and the third, you better keep in mind that people like this fought for this country also. You better keep in mind that black men like this stood in a different route and for themselves in a different way when they did this. When they did this, it was for a real reason. Even though they got kind of pushed to the side for the most part when the wars was going on during this time, and we was kind of pushed to the forefront like we was gonna get killed first and all that bullshit. Niggas like this paved the way, and y'all gotta stop doing all that goofy ass shit and start taking pride in the real story and the real history that we have within this country, because we're not like how motherfuckers try to make us out to be, bro. We really actually have a lot of work and blood shed into this damn country, bro.
The only time I've been knocked out. By 1945, Flakes had become a decorated amateur, winning the Dapper Dan Tournament's award for Outstanding Boxer. He turned professional in 1947, drifting to Buffalo, New York, where he sparred with contender Phil Moscato, before being sent away for a reason familiar to promising young fighters. He was too good. Fighting for $40 purses under aliases like Henry Blake and even Henry Cornflakes, the name eventually settled into Henry Snowflakes. Talent can become its own kind of curse in boxing. By 1948, Henry Snowflakes had become nearly impossible to match. Few managers wanted to risk their fighters against a young heavyweight who moved with frightening speed and punched with sudden, compact violence. Records surrounding Snowflakes already carried the haze of mythology. One ledger listed him at 29-0 with 26 knockouts. Another poster claimed he was 38-0 with 32 knockouts. Somewhere between fact and promotion stood the fighter himself, mysterious, elusive, unforgettable to anyone who saw him. He was tall and muscular without sacrificing agility, quick enough to make experienced heavyweights look stationary, and calm under pressure in a way old trainers noticed immediately. By January of 1948, after a year as a professional, reporters were scrambling for information on the man they had begun calling the Iceman and the Black Panther. Originally, Snowflakes was scheduled to meet world-ranked Pat Comiskey, but Comiskey withdrew citing a throat infection. Into the void stepped veteran Coleon Chaney, who confidently promised to melt Snowflakes. Chaney gave the young contender his first painful lesson in seasoned professionalism, outboxing him over the distance to win a close majority decision. Snowflakes took the defeat hard, sitting alone in the dressing room afterward and crying openly. But the setback did not last long. The Comiskey fight was rescheduled, and Snowflakes entered as a 3-1 underdog against the heavier, established contender. What followed was described by one reporter as, quote, a masterpiece of fistic skill. Snowflakes boxed brilliantly, outpointing Comiskey despite surrendering 23 pounds. At the final bell, the crowd stood and applauded his performance. 2 weeks later, they fought again in Newark. This time, it became a war. Comiskey battered Snowflake savagely in the fourth round, but the younger man survived the assault, gathered himself, and stopped the bigger heavyweight in the fifth. Suddenly, Henry Snowflakes was no longer a curiosity. He was a contender. The win catapulted Snowflakes up the rankings. He was now ranked number 6 by the National Boxing Association. One promoter wanted him to face Jimmy Bivens. New York Sun reporter Ed Van Every called him, quote, the best young heavyweight to poke his head over the horizon since Joe Louis started his climb 14 years ago. Snowflake's return to Buffalo is something more than a promising prospect now. Crowds filled the arenas to see the young heavyweight, whose reputation seemed to grow faster than reporters could verify his record. Before a sellout house, he blasted out veteran Fidel Arciniega, then 5 days later, battered Big Bill Weinberg through 10 punishing rounds. But in May of 1948 came the sternest test of his young career. Lee Oma was no hopeful opponent pulled from the local circuit. Oma had shared the ring with men like Jersey Joe Walcott and Gus Lesnovich, and carried the polished instincts of a seasoned heavyweight who understood every trick professional boxing could offer. His experience troubled Snowflakes early, yet the younger man pressed the action relentlessly, forcing the pace and edging Oma in a close decision. The verdict stirred enough debate that a rematch was quickly arranged at Madison Square Garden just 10 days later. This time, Snowflakes removed all doubt. Again, he stalked the older fighter, outworking and overpowering him over 10 rounds, while the Garden crowd warmed visibly to the calm young heavyweight. Snowflakes had been married only 3 days earlier. His career appeared to be accelerating toward a shot at the heavyweight title. Then, almost overnight, it ended. 7 days after the Oma rematch, the New York State Athletic Commission suspended Snowflakes pending a medical examination. During a routine pre-fight physical, Dr. Louis Kaiser discovered severe vision trouble in Snowflakes' right eye. Later reports differed on the diagnosis, detached retina or cataracts, but the conclusion remained the same. Henry Snowflakes would never fight again. The collapse came swiftly afterward. He drifted through mechanic jobs and labor work while the damaged eye deteriorated until it eventually had to be surgically removed. Medical bills mounted. Drinking followed. Then arrests. Traffic violations, assault charges, concealed weapons, probation violations. By 1955, the once rising heavyweight had been sentenced to Attica prison. The rise had lasted barely more than a year. The fall consumed the rest of his life. Paroled from Attica, Snowflakes almost immediately committed an armed robbery that shattered whatever remained of his life outside the ring. Snowflakes, accompanied by Walter Green and his 21-year-old brother-in-law, DeWitt Lee, targeted a small Buffalo clothing shop called Joe's Menswear. Lee borrowed a car belonging to his girlfriend, 36-year-old English teacher Beatrice Beckman, who accompanied the group that night as they drove toward the store. Inside were Joseph Friedman, 52, and his wife Helen. Snowflakes and Green entered first. Lee and Beckman remained in the vehicle, the getaway drivers. "This is a stick-up," Flakes announced. Friedman looked at the men in disbelief and replied, "What is this, a joke?" Moments later, he was struck repeatedly with a pistol and knocked to the floor. Green dragged the wounded shopkeeper toward the sewing room in the rear, while Snowflakes remained near the front, holding Helen Friedman at gunpoint. Somewhere in the chaos, a shot was fired into Joseph Friedman's head. Even then, he remained alive. Helen Friedman begged the men to summon medical help, but instead, they emptied clothing racks, tore through the register, and fled with merchandise and $96 in cash. Joseph Friedman was later pronounced dead on arrival at Our Lady of Victory Hospital. Police initially had little to work with beyond Helen Friedman's recollection that one of the robbers wore a rust-colored raincoat. The break came when an informant told detectives Snowflakes had been seen earlier that evening in a nearby tavern wearing a similar coat and carrying a handgun. Investigators showed Helen Friedman a photograph of Snowflakes. She made a tentative identification. then later confirmed it during a police lineup after Snowflakes was taken into custody.
You got to be the dumbest motherfucker to be out here robbing niggas with no motherfucking mask on. You got to be the stupidest motherfucker if you robbing motherfuckers with no mask on and you know you a famous boxer. You got to be the dumbest motherfucker in the world if you blind in one fucking eye and you a ex-famous boxer locally and niggas know who you are and can point you out in a fucking lineup if they see your motherfucking face. Yo, these niggas be dumb. But I feel bad for him because at the end of the day, it was nothing he could do to change his situation 100% because at the end of the day, his eye and his retina, this is another reason why I would never fight professionally. Those injuries can turn into some serious medical problems that you cannot erase or go back on. Like Floyd Mayweather's uncle was outside butt naked one time. Like his mental was gone. Mike Tyson can't think the same way they used to think, or can't speak the same way they used to speak as far as the speed, as far as like how they can come up with thought like this. Like a lot of them have walked away cool, but they ain't all the way 100%. Ruddock Ball and all of them. Mike, motherfucking Muhammad Ali, doing all. Come on now, that boxers go through a lot, and I hate that people just look at the sport like it's just them punching on each other. Like nah, boxers could kill each other. Boxers really go through like serious life-ending injuries or even paralyzing injuries. Like people don't really. I don't think people really get no fuck. $1 million ain't enough if it ain't to me, and especially if you're getting taxed and you paying for a belt and some other shit. Like it's dumb shit. But as far as this man go, he had an opportunity, but it just everything ain't go the way it was supposed to be going for him.
A subsequent search of Beckman's automobile uncovered articles of clothing with their labels torn away. Eventually, Snowflakes confessed. Snowflakes' brother Chester later walked into the police station carrying the murder weapon wrapped inside a leather bag. Henry had given it to him days earlier. Chester said he never looked inside until he received a phone call from Snowflakes' wife informing him of the arrest. "I want no part of this," Chester told authorities. The wreckage spread outward from there. A month later, Snowflakes' wife Florence pleaded guilty to stealing more than $270 from a women's bowling league where she served as treasurer. Beatrice Beckman, the 36-year-old schoolteacher who had provided the getaway car, avoided prosecution altogether. She resigned from her teaching position afterward, explaining she had followed DeWitt Lee because she was in love with the former student. Lee received a life sentence at Attica. Walter Green and Henry Snowflakes received death sentences on March 6, 1959. The one-time heavyweight contender was transferred to Sing Sing's death row to await his execution beneath the electric chair known grimly throughout New York as Old Sparky. In the final hours before his death, Snowflakes reportedly requested lobster, ice cream, and 4 Cuban cigars for his last meal. On May 19, 1960, Henry Snowflakes was executed. The following day, his wife Florence informed prison officials she could not afford to bury him. Like many condemned men before him, Snowflakes was laid to rest in Sing Sing's Potter's Field, the burial ground reserved for inmates unclaimed by family or friends. It was a bleak ending for a fighter who only a decade earlier had headlined Madison Square Garden and appeared destined for a heavyweight title opportunity. For a brief moment, Henry Snowflakes had seemed to stand on the edge of boxing stardom. In the end, he disappeared into prison soil almost anonymously, another ruined heavyweight swallowed by violence long after the cheering stopped.
Man, listen. I keep saying this. Crime is not the way as far as like when you're trying to get yourself back on track, especially when you're not a criminal, especially when you actually on like a trajectory to doing some positive things. When you got the discipline to become a boxer, that's one of the main things I really want to point out. That discipline is something that just show you can recover from anything, any setback, any issues, and bridge any gaps that you need to bridge. Unfortunately, he did not get that opportunity. He probably didn't feel like he had that opportunity, especially at that time frame. And like niggas be talking all type of shit about racism and this, that, and the third. But I can only imagine what he was going through at that time in particular for him. And then for him to be electrocuted like that is just crazy because it's like I know back then they did it the raw way, like, and they used to stuff shit up their ass so that when they shit and shit, put a diaper on them and stuff cotton balls up there, like shit like that, so they would when they shit themselves, they wouldn't have much to clean up. I, yeah, this ain't a way to go out like when you actually trying to become somebody, and it's sad because I could only imagine what was going through his head when he just came off a successful situation and his life just went straight downhill from there, and like now he just ended up behind bars. And it might have took years, but for him it probably wasn't but some seconds, for real, because in reality, and I wonder how the fuck they even caught that he had a problem with his retina, like a problem with his eye. And what made them even investigate him? Because they didn't necessarily say. But y'all let me know what y'all think. I think this is a sad ass story, but a lot of people end up like this from back in the day, especially when it comes to boxers, especially when it comes to a lot of boxers. It's some rappers that ended up like this, like robbing and killing somebody in the midst of doing what they was doing, ended up going to jail for the whole situation that they ended up going to jail for. I mean, that they ended up committing the crime on. And like $96 ain't worth your life, money. Even if it probably
gotta know
was
your
like
purpose, understand what work is. These niggas is lurking, observing.
that shit ain't worth your life.
Curtains, these hoes be
Little fur coats or whatever he took wasn't worth his life. But I'm out, man. Peace.
These niggas
Like, subscribe, and all that other shit.
gotta know your purpose, understand what work is. These niggas is lurking, observing. Tryna close your curtains, these hoes be